I have Boopsie Maran with me today. Boopsie is the founder and director of Places for Good, a collaborative of community advocates, planners, landscape architects, and artists applying resilience and grit to projects in New Zealand. Her approach to community activation and tactical urbanism plays a significant role in action oriented partnerships with schools, urban precincts, and citizen experts. In this episode, we talked about what safe places are and how do we feel in them, how community activated places feel like, the challenges and opportunities in public spaces in New Zealand, and much more about Boopsie as a placemaker. Assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. I'm Asban Sari, the founder of the organization Peacemakers Pakistani, and I'm bringing you the stories of placemakers, artists, and professionals from around the globe about how they created an impact and made change happen. You are listening to the Making It Happen show. Thank you for joining in. Enjoy the episode. Hello, Boopsie. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you? And it's so good to meet you.
Hello, Asba. Thank you for having me. I'm good. It's 10 p.m. here in New Zealand, so I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you very much for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I just love your smile. I wish that you always keep smiling. Okay, so you're in New Zealand, right? So tell me about it. How was it in the pandemic here, and how's it now?
How is it? Sorry, pardon me. What was your question?
How was it during the pandemic year and how's it now?
Oh, very interesting question. I haven't been asked because we go in so many waves here in New Zealand. So because we locked down more strict than most countries in the world, we had a sense of what it could be like to be free. And then Omicron came. So I think during the lockdown, we did a really good job as a community putting chalk on the grounds. We had bears in the window. And I put a joke a day as part of the international porch placemaking for 54 days because we were in lockdown here in New Zealand for 54 plus days, maybe almost 60. We weren't allowed only to the supermarket and the kids couldn't go to school and we couldn't go to work. So now we are just starting outside events because of Omicron. And we're just starting to actually plan and work on more events and placemaking, which is a big deal because that was the first lockdown. I think we had two lockdowns, and then now we are just coming out of, it wasn't so much a lockdown, but an Omicron wave where people were working from home and kids weren't going to school.
Yeah, okay. But it was something I came during the pandemic year. That's when I came to know more about New Zealand. So maybe it's something that because you were doing remarkable things, that it takes a lot of patience and courage to trust the decision of lockdown and to follow through it. But you guys did great. I hope that everyone is well and this pandemic passes in a healthy manner.
Yeah, well, they just announced, I think the two biggest things were their communications. And we had a health advisor that just stepped down and people were crying. That's how much we trusted our lead of health. So when he told us to wear masks and when Jacinda backed him up, it was just so rare. And we had messages on the radio every day at 1 p.m. So I think even with placemaking or with any government leadership, the message being so clear and the vision of how we were doing it as a team of 5 million was a big part of what we're proud of and what people saw from the other side, I assume, and that we really bound together. And yeah, so Auckland City is 95% vaccinated. And we just did it because we had a really good united trust of our leadership.
Awesome. Yeah, something to learn from all the people, from the people, you guys, and there were a lot of lessons to learn from around the globe, definitely. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on to the questions because I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. Okay, so tell me how did you find your passion for public spaces and the placemaking movement?
Well, it all started with a public park that in 2000, someone told me, hey, Boopsie, I know you're kind of into advocacy. Have you learned about this Ponsonby Park? And it's actually still today a liquor store. But in February 2020, it was almost going to become the park because we had funded the 7.7 million it would take to turn it into an actual park like the city promised. So it was similar to a lot of the projects for Mike Lydon. So in Miami, when they founded their project, same idea. There was this public space that the government had allocated to be accessible to the public, but no one was noticing that it was still privatized or still wasn't being utilized in the way that it was serving the community. So I became almost obsessed with that one site. So I really think when I talk about local passion, it was, I almost used to memorize the measurements, but it was just the size of a pocket park. But in 2000, the government had checked if we needed more green space, and they said, yes, we do. And in 2006, the government purchased the land. And for 10 plus years, it stayed a liquor store and no one said anything. So in 2016 is when I started really placemaking and learning about the movement. I flew to New York City because I have an American accent, but I've lived in New Zealand for 15 years. Um, and so it was easy enough for me to visit America, go to the source of zealous nuts like Ethan and Fred Kent and learn about the practice. And I love how placemakers share success and share failures and move forward. And yeah, so that was at one location that really got me into it. But I have a background in hospitality. So serving strangers and finding people you don't know and making their day better, whether it's with food, drink, or placemaking, is something I've loved to do for a long time. And being able to apply that skills to public open space has been a joy. And I really love my work.
That's very cool. Definitely, and yeah, uh, I love the idea of how we celebrate our successes and failures together. I really like that devotion and the community network feeling in this network. However, I'm in living in Pakistan, and whenever I connect with the people around the globe, it's like coming home, and it's like I have known them for years. You know that it's something similar with you. Like I didn't feel that I have met you today for the first time. So that's amazing, and yes, I love the work that I do as well. Okay, so tell me, what is your vision for Places for Good?
Well, we have a saying, it's make me aware, make me care, give me a call to action. So I really hope that people have the same passion that you and I have, that when we learn about someone's issues, we are now aware. And then by learning their issues, not only do we start to care for them, we are able to spread their issues to higher powers or to people that can actually help them and give them that call to action. And I think I really want places to be good, to be known for enabling more care into others, like empathetic solutions, and also participatory practices. So as much as we're solving people's problems, we're doing it in a way that they see fit, and we're not giving it all to them. We're working alongside. And so usually the Places for Good title, what came about because it was we only supported projects that were usually free to enjoy. So we never charged a fee. So the government usually gives us a grant, or a private firm wants to have a parking lot party, but to actually be a participant in it, it's free of charge. So it's for good. And then also it's for perpetuity. So I generally like, as a sustainable mode, to, if we use a bean bag, that bean bag then goes into storage and comes out again. It's not a disposable system. And so it tries to be a sustainable, free to enjoy purpose that generally works on care and support and improving, like betterment, but everyone in it together. So it's a shared joy, not just look what I did, I'm amazing. We all do it together.
That's cool because uh, whenever I hear this word like places for good, it just signifies a place, not someone in particular. Yeah, it's something for all, for the community, and I love that. I wish you all the best for your work and for your vision. Okay, so now tell me, what are the challenges and opportunities that you find in public spaces in New Zealand, especially Auckland?
Well, in Auckland, we became a super city. And so we have 21 wards Similar to, I spoke to a member in Philadelphia, part of Placemaking US, and he said it's a similar system where you have, like he said fiefdoms, which is an American kind of historical statement, but you have little leadership and then you have a larger mayor. And I think for placemaking purposes, it was easier when we had smaller funds in smaller regions. I'm sure if you're doing a huge street development and you're doing a motorway between 5 wards, the super city is awesome for saving cost. But what came at a loss was our access to our public spaces, because it was all at a central government level, as in the city, versus I could walk down the street, go to my local board, have a chat, and get the keys to the hall. We used to be able to get the keys to our local hall, and now it's a lot more complex. So access to particularly our halls and open spaces is more layers of bureaucracy now. And that's a big struggle. And often I get asked a lot about how to get a permit for a space that I think 10 years ago people wouldn't have had to ask for in such a difficult way. And then the other access, I guess it's cost of materials being on the top, we call it, or the bottom of the planet. Anything that we don't build here, we have to get from far away. So getting supplies has become a huge issue for placemaking here in New Zealand. But I think in particular for Auckland, I'm really working hard on place-based access. So rather than one location permissions coming from 5 different offices, there's one in Māori, the word is kaitiaki. So a guardian who can give permission and also give all the frameworks to access to play or a live music event, and you're not going through 7 layers of bureaucracy to have a 2-hour market. I don't know if it's similar in Pakistan if you wanted to do a market day.
Well, it's different in different areas, and it's a lot. It's different over here because the professional stuff is based on the connections, I guess. And so, yeah, that depends on if you have a strong connection, so you can get the permission. And if not, then you can only dream. And you can make the connection first. So that's how it's here. And of course, the bureaucracy thing and the government issues and their involvement is something that we struggle as well. Therefore, we haven't started any projects like that yet. We are just building the community and the trust among the people for now in Pakistan, placemaking in Pakistan. So, okay, you are a placemaker, and being a woman, what I really ask myself often is that what is a safe place for myself or children and to walk alone, basically over here or anywhere if I'm. So, how do you define a safe place? What is it to you if you are in New Zealand or anywhere in the world? How do you?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I've traveled alone as a female when I was 15 through Europe, and I traveled alone as a female when I was 19, 21, and then twice with 2 small children. And so I always am hyper aware because I've gone through all those stages. I think when people maybe start traveling in their later years, it's hard because you haven't had that learning. So I even actually taught a solo female travel class at the YHA a couple times for the city of Santa Monica before I moved to New Zealand, because it is an issue. So I think rather than having to not travel solo, it's about first and foremost that the female needs are accounted for. So often we all know that it's been said that males planned and designed our cities until most recently. And so when you can tell a female has been in it, maybe if there's seating, if there's a toilet, if there's water to drink, these are all things where I feel looked after. But walking at night, it's definitely lighting, but sometimes we've learned now that too much lighting can cause dark spots, and that's where people hide. So it's this tugging to and fro between what safety, obvious safety changes. I think the best thing you can do for a safe environment is other people out. So a night market is great. In Brazil, there were so many people playing beach volleyball. So I went out really late in Brazil by myself because it was full of just everyday people doing sport. So it's called passive surveillance. So it's just, and my friend told me a really good story because I love it when people tell me about community wins or places they feel safe and see activities because they know we're placemakers. They'll come up to us and go, "Oh, you would have loved it. This happened." And so they understand the practice. She said there was a dead's the wrong adjective, an empty public space for like 20 years off and on. And someone had just put in a volleyball court. So at night, people were sitting around it. They weren't the ones playing the volleyball, but if two people played volleyball, all of a sudden 40 people, because there's all these high-rise apartments. So that safety is creating an opportunity for some people to do play and become passive surveillance. And then you feel safe at night walking through those areas. But if the streets are empty, I wouldn't walk out.
Yes, I agree because having people around, it creates a sense of having a community or having a resource or somewhere to go for help. Basically, an escape that's possibility, and a possibility of escape is there. Yes, and recently I've come across this great quote, which is now my favorite, is that the greatest resources we have is each other. So in any way possible, there needs to build a relationship and a trust among the people for a great community or for safety in belonging. Because since I work on the mental health aspect of human beings, so it really comes down to the humans and the connection. Okay, so share your story of global experience and how do you envision implementation of it in local projects?
So I guess it's small tactical activations where people can calibrate or measure for themselves. So it's like if you're asking, so how I can make a global placemaking locally as a global impact, is that your question, Asba? Or how would you describe it a little more fuller, the question? Sorry.
It's okay. I mean that you have traveled a lot in the different areas in the world. So what were your lessons from there, and how do you how do you implement those lessons into the local project?
Okay, cool. Sorry. Yeah, I guess one example is, so in Australia, there's a lot of tools for like monitoring, which is very important to especially get funding and to show bureaucrats or higher government the impact of your activations, let's say. So I met through the placemaking network and placemaking X and placemaking Australia, people like Lucinda from Neighborlytics and also Inhabit Place. And I really like that tool because I don't spend a lot of time making reports. So I needed support with that. And they created a software tool that we were able to use in Auckland, but meet with her in Australia. So by using her Australia tool, I could actually collect data on the streets in Auckland. And in Australia, my report was being generated. So it's so important, I think, as placemakers to travel. And when we travel, we are improving practice, whether it's through tech or through being in the spaces. And also in 2019, I went to the Chattanooga conference and got to go to like the Glass Street Collective, and I sat at tables with people from China, Korea, and like you said, we're all the same. So I'm in a small town, Amazon's coming in or a big box is coming in, and all we're thinking about is how that's going to support small business. And that was like global. And I really think that by sitting at a table and realizing that global practices, mostly because they might have dealt with that problem before you have, especially in the new urban areas. So of course, Sweden, Paris, London are all kind of at the same pace. But if you're a newer urban growth, you have so much to learn from these big cities. And I really think I traveled to a lot of cities on my own all over the world because I'm half Czech, half Filipino. So just to visit aunties and uncles, I've always been traveling. And public transport, the cost of it, visiting friends in Holland, free weekends, free nights. These are huge ideas for some cities. And then when I explained to them that I did it when I was 19, 20 years ago, it blows a different city's mind and it gives them hope that not only is it possible, but it's been done for a while. So I really think the more we share past experiences and possibilities for the future in our localized context, should only be a good thing. And people who are in positions of power should never be threatened by bigger cities. They should only adapt it to meet the needs of their people and take it as a complementary practice and a useful tool. And we're not saying it's the best way if you're Paris. We're just saying, here's what works over here. Maybe you can apply parts of it to your city, whether your city is 100,000 people or 7 million. I think it doesn't matter if people are moving around better and feel safer and are having more fun in their city.
Yes, definitely. The way you mention it, it's like this is how I came to it myself because um, I had a childhood in which I was experiencing my city in a more experiential way. Like I was traveling and I was able to interact with people easily. But then shifts happened and the industrialism came in and the focus turned towards different things, you know. So we were losing the culture and everything. That's more humane. That's more human-like experiences. So, and we were like, we were told to stay indoors because it was more safe. So this is something I wanted to explore by because I just came into contact again when I was studying architecture and for the projects we had to go out for the site work, etc. So I just had to be, I was just observing my city and the behaviors around, and I was trying to figure out what has happened, what changed things. And then I came to the point that for the mental health and the physical health of human beings, they have to go out, they have to interact with nature, they have to rest and relax with different people. You know, the whole journey was, and I just figured out that public spaces is the answer, and this was my thesis and everything, and I wasn't able to approve it, you know, the get approval for it because I was an architect. I was an architecture student and I was doing an urban project. So I wasn't getting the approval for it. However, I was mentioning it to them that what is the benefit of having a building that's comforting for someone, but when they go out and they come back home, they are all frustrated because public spaces are not serving them. So the house is not going to be comforting for all in the house because the connections build, the environment has an impact on humans' mental health. So it's going to be affecting the health of overall family. This was my point of view. This was my psychological approach to the project. And then I came to know about the project for public spaces and the work of Ethan and Fred, and then I realized that oh, people are doing this thing, and they're very successful in it because I just did my thesis in 2018, and the work has been being done for a long time. So then I connected. I just sent a grateful message. I was grateful to Fred for their work. I just sent him the email and appreciating his work, and this is how it began. But my thesis got the approval when I connected it to the placemaking movement. I named it the placemaking. That this is a placemaking project, and it got the approval. That's okay. You can do it now. But it was amazing because this is how I got the hope that people are doing it around the world. It's possible here as well. So yes, thank you for your words, and I really love that experience of yours and how you have given the hope to people through it as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think it's also more important that we even write a little more to create the texts that support theses, because I think it really helps that Fred and Ethan and Mike Lydon and more placemakers are creating these journal entries and these books and texts, because when someone like you is trying to apply to a lead, you have all these references.
Yeah, it helped. Definitely helped because the points that when I talked to Ethan and I told him that these are common sense point of views if we are just using our common sense, and he said
Yes.
definitely it's so human thing that we can't challenge it. But for the thesis and yes, I just use the diagrams that they have mentioned in their projects and in their toolkits, and it served me well. It helped me a lot. And yes, I
Fantastic.
we have to be it's easier to have the toolkits for the newcomers who are more logical, because people are more practical and logical. They can they find it helping when they have the toolkits. Definitely, yes.
Yes.
Not all have the capability of going in deep into research and then figuring out things differently, but the toolkits help a lot. Definitely, we need to create more on our own as well. Yes.
Hmm.
Okay, lastly, the small neighborhood actions and interactions materialize profound transformation, you believe. Share any stories with us.
So I think for me, I work a lot with kids because I'm also a part-time school teacher. Because in America, the schools are great partners. The public system of schools and the parents work really well with government often, or they can get funding. It's just in the culture to marry those two often. It's just kind of starting here in New Zealand because it is a social system. So you assume that across the board it's been covered. But as the city grows and immigrants come, it's all kind of mixing up more. So it's not as definite, I find personally. So I was just trying to learn more about why schools aren't working that much with placemakers, or why schools aren't formally more invested in public space. Or in my case, I do more and more walkability stuff. So I'm really passionate about safe walking routes. So when we talk about safety, pardon me, um, my daughter couldn't walk safely to school because a stranger, because we're quite in the city center, tried to ask her if she wanted a lift on their scooter. And I had learned, for instance, that in Skawina, Poland, Maciej is an amazing placemaker in Poland, that they had stickers on the windows to say that this was a safe place to enter if you were getting hassled, or that shop would be looking out for your kid. And that's a very hyper local school to home change decision and placemaking activation that is supporting the bigger idea of let's all walk to support the environment, or let's all walk because it's the preferred way to move. And then so that's just one example from overseas. And then when you see it happen more and more, it's these small activations that can change policy. So a boy in another school raised $3,000 for a basketball hoop, and then another kid saw that and wanted to put a basketball hoop in a public space. And then someone tried to remove it, but the mom next door said, I'm going to have a party. I'm going to invite New Zealand basketball, and we're going to activate it, and we're going to do a party. And she did a party, saved the basketball court, because then the neighbor was like, oh, I don't like bouncing basketballs, but it's so nice to see all these children out. Because if you don't place make and you see an empty public space, people A, take it for granted, and B, think you don't need it. And which is means our work is so hard post COVID because people have forgotten what activated spaces look like, and even forgotten how to use them. And the money is spent on other things. So we not only have to work harder to find the funding, so it really is going to be hyper local, your park across the street, that you have to activate and remind people what it feels like to share moments physically outside your home. It's so different, right? And so the third local activation we did that's hyper local but has a global or policy impact was a young girl I ran into. She was walking to school and felt very unsafe, and I knew her school was on a very dangerous path. And she did 4 practice walks with me and then allowed me to put a microphone on her and film it. And I got an email from the huge Auckland City Department of Transport saying the video is doing the rounds, and they already have started fixing the footpath with planter boxes, which is a placemaking activation. But it's from a 9-year-old kid telling me there's this need, us acting on it, doing the action, because she made me aware, I cared, and then we did action. And now the government was made aware. It's like a cycle. So you hope people use this localized cycle, and it moves up until someone, so rather than just being someone you know, it's not just someone you know anymore. You can't ignore it. So maybe not everyone locally knows those people higher up, but you've created systems that means they can't pretend it's not happening and that can't do action. So we talked about it today for a project. Someone told me from government that I really need to make friends with that person. And I disagreed. I said, I don't think I should have to make friends with someone in government for action to happen. I think it's a two-way street in that we need to be looking for local issues and working together to see if they're similar, to solve 5 problems rather than one at a time. The 5 at once in local areas, like, so you turn local into regional into placemaking movement, right? Because we all share these issues.
And while you were saying that, I just realized that as a placemaker, something we need to do the best is to listen, to just listen to people what they have to say instead of just saying it, first. And as a leader, this is the quality of a leader, that he speaks at last. He hears people's opinion and then he speaks his opinion. And that's only possible if you have the courage and ability to listen, because there is a lot of people teaching you a lot of things. Even the silence has the answer. People become silent when they are not able to say anything. Yeah, that's something deeper. Great. So I love the idea of that. And being a teacher, you get to interact with a lot of children, and yes, that's a great opportunity to learn from the people, from children, definitely, because they have a lot of things to say. And I feel that when I see children in the streets, the first thought that comes to my mind is that this is a safe place, because there are children, they are feeling safe over here, so I can feel safe as well, definitely. Okay, so let's move on to the rapid fire, the questions that I ask everyone. Okay, so Boopsie, what drives you? What keeps you focused on public spaces or the work you do?
It's when I see someone repeating it or saying, oh my God, you would have loved this event. It was a live band in the middle of nowhere. When people on their own parallel our work with joy or a change, a policy change, or a movement in their local space that usually sounds really fun and cool. I know we're doing something right when someone knows that. Another instance is one of the woman that did the basketball court event, who first she said, hey, our basketball court's threatened. Should I do something? And I said, do it. You just need one person to go, it's not a crazy idea. Try it. Then she tried it. Then she said, okay, now I'm going to do it the same place, a new event. And then she did it again. And then a neighbor saw her event and wants to fund 100 of them all over the city. And it's like, if you just find it won't hit every time, but when it hits and it hits big like that, it's just the best. There's nothing better. And so someone could say, sorry, you have no access to that park over there. Hopefully you live in a city where there are lots of parks. So sometimes you'll have a failed event, but even if 1 out of 10 is a happy kid that's getting a free tree. So I've done like native tree with Pallet Kingdom to create pallets into pot plants, to see pictures of kids with their plant and then learning that it moved to their new flat 2 years later shows the cycle of our work and the importance of our work, and that the value doesn't fade. It just hopefully spreads, if anything. And there's never enough of it. Like you said, there's so many architecture books and so many houses being built, but we as placemakers are working so much on that public realm and the safety and the joy that's outside the 4 walls, right? So yeah, I love it. I love when people have that kind of joy.
Yes, and the thing about children is that they are the best to spread the message or the fire around. They like to talk, they like to share what they have enjoyed a lot, so they spread it very quickly. I love
And the best,
talking to
actually,
children.
my number one quotes are, that was so cool. That was a really cool vibe from an adult, and from a kid is, when can we do it next time? Or when a parent's like, my kid keeps asking me when we're doing it again. And I know we've hit the mark, because if a kid is begging and it's just like live music in a drum circle, or it's very simple, cheap things. But if a kid wants more of it, they've spoken that we're on the right track, right?
Yeah, their approval is the best because they get easily bored. If they're enjoying it, then definitely we have made something cool. Okay, share any special memory or any happiest moment of your work life, the proudest one.
Yeah, I guess the proudest was there's nothing better than a reference that those events were fun or when can we do it again. And I guess I really like when someone in another country says something like you're the parklet queen, or I've started doing these advocacy parklets where I park it in front of a space, a public space that's not yet public, and I put together with Pallet Kingdom, we put in pallets and we put in seating, and a local government official will sit in it and say, I feel your point. So you could go to 100 meetings and say, please, please, we really want a seat bench. But if I put in a car parking space, a water container, and a seat and shade, these, someone running for Congress, the equivalent of Congress here, it's members of parliament. She sat in the parklet and said, I feel your point. And I was like, that is what placemaking is about. That was my first parklet, was in 2017. And a member of parliament sat in it and said, I feel. And I think that is our biggest job and our biggest struggle, is having a wide range of young, old, multiple cultures feel, and knowing how to reach the senses of smell and sound that some people might not like or might like, and how sensitive we are to caring that their needs are met and whether or not we meet them. So yeah, my proudest moment was when they sat there and said the word, I feel your point. I feel like that's when I knew that we were on the right path.
Yeah, and that's a huge moment, something we need to celebrate. And okay, share your hardest moment or the struggling moment of work life and any lesson you learned from it.
Yeah, so I tried to close a road just from the public. So I didn't want to tell too many shops because sometimes it becomes too commercialized, and I didn't want sponsorship. I wanted it not necessarily be just for kids, but I wanted it to feel like a market street, but open to the public without any branding, right? And that is the hardest part, is when people go, why would you do that? You're not getting paid, because often I just cover the cost of the traffic management. So I do some projects where I'm paid as a consultant, and some projects are for people and are volunteer. And this was a volunteer role, and I just had the cost, and I wanted to show how difficult it is to close a road to cars. And this road was designed to be a market at some point, but no one had ever tried it because they're so scared of closing a road. And I had to stop. Like, I had a cease and desist. They couldn't believe that I would want to close a road just for fun. They were worried about the aesthetic. So I learned that even if it's for the public good, you have to take the risk of informing every single stakeholder, particularly. And I told the managers of the shops, who thought, great, you're doing this free party for us, but I didn't tell the owners. So you really have to do your homework and not be afraid to talk at the highest level, and maybe have a better pitch that's more like strong to deliver to those highest end landlords, where they understand placemaking. Because maybe, of course, it's easy to tell a regular person and manager a street party's fun, but we should actually support each other in writing better briefs, or elevator pitch, it's called, to an owner, to a landlord, in that they only see the value add of a 2-hour party on a street. Because after they stopped it, they then asked me to come back and do it with them, alongside them, which is probably what I should have done at the beginning, but I was just scared they were going to brand it. But they still like the idea. They just wanted every stakeholder. Sometimes you're going to be able to get it through with a few stakeholders, but in that instance, I really had to work, co-collaborate, participatory with as many stakeholders as possible when you're closing a road. It's a tricky dance of how many people you tell versus, do I just get it done? That's the hardest, and always that's when I learn the most, is in each local area, who should I always tell and who doesn't need to know and who's too busy. And stakeholder mapping is very important, basically, knowing your audience.
Right, this is a great lesson for me as well, because I haven't tried to do it yet, because I'm so scared to do it, and I'm so scared of the feedback, because the judgment and the criticism comes before any action can be seen or can be celebration there can be done. And yeah, it's struggling thing, definitely. And yes, I realize that if we have no reason, over here in any street, in any community, It's easy to block the road by placing tents for any activity or for any event, but if we are just closing the road saying that the kids need to play over here, the kids will be sure the kids will be snubbed to their home for that sort of thing, for that sort of confidence or boldness. But yeah, it's something that we will learn through the process and how to communicate to the people that it's important and it's needed. That's a great lesson, definitely.
I feel like I want to put tents on the secret sides and in between they can't see the kids playing. Sorry, we're putting more tents up, and then they like you kind of block it off. Yeah, that's the hardest part is the when you're first trialing projects, when it's just a trial, how much stakeholder involvement is safe to get to the action, or if it stops you. And I guess you have to stop a couple, but it costs money and time, right? It's the funding for the trials.
Yes, definitely. Yes, definitely, because it needs a lot of skill. It's a need a lot of skill and a lot of, what do I say? Sometimes I do believe that we need to be a bit of manipulation. We have to use some manipulating tools
Yes,
to
it's a
convince
what's the
another
word?
person.
It's like when you're trying to negotiating tools. You
Yeah,
need, yeah, it's definitely like a lawyer. There's a lot of great lawyer placemakers.
yeah.
I think
Viviana,
a
I guess.
lawyer's great.
Viviana Cordero. I
Yes,
know her. Yeah,
she's amazing. And you need, that would be a good suggestion for you. If I did it again,
yeah.
I would have had found a lawyer who's a friend and just written out something that had the context written in the language it's your translator basically, right?
Yeah,
We're translators through so many layers of culture and access. And so when you have a lawyer for that top few tiers, you're better understood because they can't imagine you want to close a street for free and for fun. It just doesn't
it
register.
doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So lawyer, there's a good.
We are making strategies over here.
Yeah.
Okay, now tell me any favorite placemaking mantra of yours or quote that you stick to when you are going for a new project, like if you motivated.
Oh, it's fun because when I made my way into the offices of placemaking X and PPS, Ethan said, "You're a zealous nut." And I feel like that's a good start for the practice. And I really like that as a mantra. And I've been doing my work is a lot of make me aware, make me care, give me a call to action. I've really liked because I'm doing the same work as you, asking good questions. I feel like when have them prepared, whether you're with a colleague who works with you. I wish I had better questions when I was in the PPS office in 2018. I feel like that ups your game and ask good questions when you're in the room with the mayor or when you're with the person who you're really scared of and you're terrified of. It's not so much defend yourself, it's also asking what's there to lose, or why do you hate it so much, or why don't you trust me? So I really like ask. And the last one is what does problem solve look like? Because often it's a very simple, but it's like when we have success, what will it look like? Will it be a low level? I actually sometimes 3 levels of success, right? So success could be just the street closure. So I felt like when I didn't have my street party, I was still so proud when the sign went up that said street closed, that I had spent 6 months closing it and the sign went up. The party never happened, but the sign went up and I did it as a community member. So I think, yeah, those are the 3: the make me aware, make me care, give me a call to action, and the ask good questions, not necessarily hard questions, just good ones that you prepare. And yeah, what does problem solve look like?
Yeah, cool. And it made me laugh, but the memory of it that there are sometimes a call for action for people to contribute to their ideas and share just, but we haven't been able to pull it off because people didn't come in. But I was so proud that I made. There was an internal struggle to let the voice, to let the call out, and to be able to talk about it. especially the mental health topics, and the internal struggle and just putting out the poster made me feel so accomplished that at least I shared the word. I let it out from myself. I released it, and it's okay if people didn't come, but they are aware now that it's important. It's something important. And yes, that's something. When you mentioned that you saw the sign, that gives you a lot of courage and a lot of contentment that it's at least it's there. At least it's something. Something has happened at least. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so do you have any opinion for Pakistan or placemaking in Pakistan? Any good or bad?
I I think a lot of these problems we have as placemakers is we need to find our allies and also learn more about the people that misunderstand our work. And I think for placemaking Pakistan, you're doing a great job of bringing together all the experts you can find and learning. And I do the same when I work on my podcast. I love the questions asking, the interviewing, and putting that into my local work. Uh, we're working at the speed of trust. So we all have to be patient, and trust for each individual takes longer or shorter depending on their lived experience, right? And I think sometimes we forget people outside of our work have lots of distrust for public good for whatever reason. And we're so trapped. Like, you could come in my house, sleep on my bed, and I'd feed you breakfast and give you orange juice tomorrow morning because I'm a placemaker and that's what we do. If you did that to someone who was like a mayor, they'd be freaked out because I don't know, different layers of our societies, right? And so it's not really advice. I just think as placemakers, it's for everywhere that we work at. When we're in our work, it's at the speed of trust. We have to be patient, and like all, we're young. So while Ethan says the placemaking Aotearoa is an old network, it's also a young city. And I think in these urban, so as a young network for placemaking Pakistani and for Auckland as a young city, we just have to be patient and celebrate our little wins as big as the big wins, because otherwise we'd all quit.
Thank you. Yeah, it means a lot because yes, the speed of trust. Whenever I'm asked that what the work you do, this the only thing that I have to say to them is wait, you will know with time, because the struggles we face is exactly the same thing that you mentioned, that it's about the trust, because it's such a capitalism culture that people are so much into making benefits and incentives that if you're doing something for their well-being with an intention of serving them, they will judge you for having a personal motive in it. Like, you can't just be hospitable to people without any um, personal benefit. However, I just love seeing people happy. It makes me happy. So, is there any other reason that needs to be done? And yeah, that's something that people need. People realize only after they have built some sort of trust with you. You're right. The speed of trust and building at the speed of trust and patience. Definitely, that's the two. And gratitude, patience and gratitude. Yes, thank you so much for sharing that with me. Okay, lastly, any advice for the young professionals that are joining in around the globe?
I think it's important. Like for me, living in New Zealand, I've learned a lot about the indigenous culture. So I think you need to do your research wherever you're placemaking. And we do an introduction in Tereo for our Maori for our audiences because it grounds us. So normally, um, as a placemaker, I try to start any formal introductions with Tena Koto Katoa, Ko Boopsie Toku Ingawa, Itipu Maiho, Ko Los Angeles, Inari Tamaki Makoto, Toku Turanga Waiwai Inayane. So it says that my name is Boopsie. I've come from Los Angeles, but now I'm standing here in Auckland. And I think when you're a young placemaker, it's finding your place. And it includes not just studying the indigenous knowledge and knowing who you're working with and knowing your stakeholder mapping. It's really researching where you're choosing to work, as much as the geography, the people. And that's the trickiest thing about placemaking is it crosses so many expertises. We have a lot of work on our hands because it's not just hospitality and care and joy. It's the geography. Does it rain? checking the weather. Like I spent a lot of time checking the weather all the time, flooding. My last job, I learned about drainage because there was one drainage that always got full. So if I had an event there, I really needed to pay attention. So as a young placemaker, um, really try to research where you are. And especially if you're foreign to the space, like myself in New Zealand, I had to do a lot of homework and I'm always learning. And as a young placemaker, I brought some books for your listeners. This was given to me by my neighbor. I could put some links. I just grabbed them right before this interview. I thought, ooh, this is the newest by the Dutch Cycling Embassy crew and Melissa Bartlett and her partner. And
Fantastic.
then
Yeah.
this is a
Great. Great.
you'd be surprised. And as for my work, I needed to do
Maori.
Maori place. So
Nice.
that's indigenous place names. And then I just got this secondhand. So I'm helping.
Yeah.
And then that's a classic if you work in transport. But for our empathetic care for, I think this is the one I get for myself for when I'm feeling down
Ben Brown.
and I don't know when I don't know how to deal with my loss. It brings me back to the self-care is important too, young placemakers. Self-care.
A lot of it. Yes, and those inspirational speakers, they are the must to read because they
Yes.
give you a lot of courage and courage to take action, even if people don't understand you. You need to stand
Yes.
there alone. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing those books with us. I would appreciate if you can share those names with me through email so I can put the link in the description below as well. It would be
Mhm.
great, and thank you so much for um, such an amazing advice to the young professionals. And yes, it does take a lot of research because I have learned it through experience myself as well. Because we took some actions in an institutional place taking event and realized that those materials were harmful, were not such a good choice, and we had made it some permanent shifts. We have taken some permanent actions, and they were hard to manage for a long time. So yeah, it needs some research, and we learn through the process definitely. So there is no need to be discouraged, but there is a lot of need to be attentive and to be mindful that yes, you are going to learn lessons, and you have to learn them before making any mistakes in future. Thank you so much, Boopsie. Thank you for your time. It was lovely meeting you. I just felt a heartfelt connection with you. It's such a great conversation. Have a great time ahead, and thank you again.
Thank you again. So much gratitude for this evening. And I appreciate all the work you're doing
Thank
from your side of the world, linking us all up. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm very honored, and I have the pleasure of meeting you all. I'm honored that you people are joining me and trusting me and sharing the word with the world. So looking forward to meet you all in person as well. Take care and have a good night and all the love for your kids as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tanakota. Bye.
Bye.
Kakite.
Take care.